Welcome to the first ever episode of Hackers and Humans. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Jim McConnell, principal for Ask McConnell, a consultancy and advisory team specializing in converged security services. With over 30 years of corporate security experience, Jim has seen it all. He was the first fellow in Verizon's corporate security office, where he managed program operations for the executive protection and special event security team. Jim has operated in 12 different countries and holds 15 patents. Beyond his professional accomplishments, he dedicates time to mentoring transitioning military and law enforcement personnel, as well as providing pro bono security support to over 350 churches. He's also a local volunteer first responder. On top of all of this, he's somehow found the time to write 2 books, Converged Security Metrics and Converged Safety Metrics. Welcome to the show, Jim.
It's an honor to be here with you and your team and the audience, and so love to jump in and provide some value from both sides to the audience.
Right on. So I guess kicking into it, what is executive protection? How did you get into it? I feel like it's the kind of thing that people, don't know about unless they're close to it, like a larger company. So, what is it? Sounds like the secret service for CEOs. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, hopefully not as many cameras and cool outfits. I'm a big fan of converged security, and for the ones that don't know what that term means, it's really the convergence and the thinking about of physical security, cybersecurity, personnel security, information security, kind of all think about those things when we're talking about protection of some asset. And so I take a look at executive and the word protection as effectively 2 separate words. Let's take the executive side. Obviously, that can be an executive, however the organization defines what executives need to be protected. And that executive may not have an executive title, but there's some set of people that need more protection because of the threat and the risks that they have. It doesn't mean that any of the humans that work for an organization don't need protection, but there are some people that may be under higher threat or risk. And then on the protection side, I'm a pretty broad person. So if we as security professionals are not thinking about the classic close protection as they move around different events or something like that, but also thinking about impacts against and protection against information security of that principal, the physical security of that principal, their car, facilities, their family sometimes. And so really thinking about all the different types of threats and vulnerabilities, et cetera. And so that sometimes that will cause it to say, well, I've got a department called executive protection, but we don't do all of that. Okay. Again, kind of a scope and things like that. If I'm the executive, do I have an expectation when you say you're protecting me? I think I have an expectation of more than just maybe traditional. 2025, we need to think a lot broader when it comes to executive and the word protection separately and together.
Got it. And, just thinking about that, that a lot of the audience of this podcast is going to be people in security, like CISOs. Can you talk to me about the intersection with, information security and how that's kind of changed over time?
Sure. When I got into security, it was in kind of the path of information security. So what I kind of keep going back to, my CISSP boot camp forever ago, they talked about this thing called information, and they talked about this thing called security. And so when I kind of step back from that, I think about, does it matter the form and the factor and the storage of that information? And now we think about the role of executive protection, event security of an organization. Is there information that needs to be protected specifically around those individuals or those events? And there's a whole lot of information that I use and my peers use when we're dealing with protection of these events and people that is incredibly valuable to adversaries. So again, information security, separating from the term cybersecurity. But to me, again, going back to executive and the word protection needs to include information security also.
Got it. And, one of the things that kind of sparked this podcast, or this episode rather, I put out a call on LinkedIn. Thank you for responding. There's been 2 really big major events in the past couple months that have huge implications, I think, particularly for executives. The first one, I think most listeners will be familiar with, which was the just brutal murder of the CEO of UnitedHealthcare in New York. But the other one that people might be less familiar with is something called Salt Typhoon, which we'll touch on later in more detail. But the TLDR for everyone is, according to the U.S. government, our adversaries, notably China, infiltrated our telecommunications infrastructure and are likely still there. And we'll get into how to think about that. But I think the people that are going to be kind of immediately affected, a lot of the guidance has been, hey, executives. So, kind of with the lens of those two things, I'd like to kind of dig into the first one through the lens of executive security, kind of starting with UnitedHealthcare and what happened there.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry for him and his family and the people of that organization. There is no excuse, and so praying for those folks to recover from this and of course, sadly learn from it. But what I would say is if we look at any organization, regardless of industry, you've got some secret sauce, and the folks that have that secret sauce within the organization strategically or technologically or something like that, may be, again, threatened in a unique way that is different than other people in the organization. And so I think that when we look at let's just simplify it down to a company event, that whether executives are attending or not, normally they are, what do we need to protect about that event? Do we need we're not going to advertise it out generally in a big situation, big way. It's probably not a good idea. So the hotel location, are we going to try to limit that? Are we going to try to limit who's going to be there? The guest appearances. If we have, let's say, a celebrity that's going to be there, I can tell you on their contract, they're probably going to be doing some security in that contract. And so there's a lot of elements, just even to an end-of-the-year Christmas event, there's security there. So physical security, some cyber security, information security, that folks in the CISO world, the CSO world, whatever title you have in the security world in your organization, or if you outsource it, that they need to really be thinking about in kind of that checklist of what do we need to protect in these areas. And I think information security, broadly speaking, defining information, is something that we as security professionals and executive professionals may have not thought about as much as we should have in the past. And again, I'm gonna pound the sand of education in 2025 that we've got to protect that information better, and understand what information is needed, what information gets to go on YouTube and on the different things, and what information needs to be held close to the chest.
Yeah, and I think in UnitedHealthcare particularly, one of the things I emailed you about yesterday was in the alleged manifesto from the killer. He actually said he was using social engineering, right? I got a quote from his supposedly leaked manifesto that was transcribed from a handwritten note they found on him. He said that this was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. So I don't, love to speculate, but given your experience and kind of given what happened, what's the big takeaway? What's the big learning for folks that are worried about a copycat attack or like a similar kind of threat for themselves?
Sure. I think that I just did a class yesterday for job seekers and scams against job seekers. And I go right through a social engineering education to these folks. And some of them know it, some of them don't. Show them some examples. And the one example I use in there is where I had an interaction with a fraudster. I'm doing social engineering against what they thought would be me and involved my late mom. And ultimately, I spent 2.5 hours with him. That wasn't me just wasting time, but it was an education to say, folks that are going to invoke social engineering to demonstrate or carry out some type of attack, and to attack, again, broadly defined, not just physical, has time. Ross, you and I don't. We have a busy schedule. So they have time. They're thinking about it. They're thinking about it differently. And so how do we educate executives, their assistants, their event coordinators, their vendors that support them, drivers, all the different elements of that. And of course, the people that are protecting their information, whether on a laptop or phone or whatever, about social engineering and the effect on the executive. How do we test them maybe a little bit more? And that testing may not be just a phishing email. That's a hugely valuable capability of phishing emails. But how do we take that out into the realm of other areas like voice, like face-to-face, et cetera? So I think the testing and the training around social engineering, just as one element of adversarial tools, needs to just expand into the thinking about, if I had unlimited time to try to breach someone through social engineering, what tools would I use? And now let's train on all of those tools. So we're educating much more broadly than a narrow focus.
Yeah, I think in some ways we may have done a disservice by just overemphasizing, okay, phishing email, click link, this is social engineering, when it's so much more. And I also think that, the time in the past where it could have maybe removed this information, it's totally gone. You can scrub information all you want. It's what's the internet, that's it. I mean, experience getting hacked. Like you can't stop this stuff from getting out there. So I think going forward, you can't just hope that, we're going to remove all this information and we're going to be good. No one's be able to find us. That will help. But to your point, someone with unlimited time and resources, they're going to figure it out. Because that means picking up the phone.
Yeah, and I think that, even to the level of, I've done a lot of supply chain security work. I've had the privilege of working on a lot of contracts. So do we just go into the hotel or the event center that we're doing and just sign the paper of contract? Wonder if we need to start thinking about putting security requirements into an event security facility venues contract like we do by contracted. You and I, Ross, were working with a client and we were under contract. There's going to be security requirements in there. You protect their information, I protect your information, three-way, whatever it is. But, if we take ABC Corporation, ABC Hotel Organization, and put security requirements, cyber, physical, information, training, etc., into those contracts. Jim, we've never done that before. Do we think about that going forward? What are their responsibilities besides, some terms and conditions that we put into some travel system? Is that enough? I don't think so anymore. And so they're a vendor. ABC Hotel, they're a vendor. Let's think about them as a vendor, to think about them as a point of attack or a point of information. And, maybe they need to step up their game in the event, venue, hotel, hospitality industry. Do they need to step up their security beyond kind of the traditional things that we've seen in a hotel to incorporate these before we as organizations that are going to use them? Hey, my people are in there. I want you to protect them in lots of different ways. So I just, contracts are going to be a little bit different. And those T's and C's where we've got these things like hotel situations, event situations, do we cordon off places? Do we protect the reservation under an anonymous name? We could go down a laundry list of things that we could brainstorm on, things like that.
And we did for software.
If they get an alert, an email that looks like asking for some information about the event, do they know who to call at your company to say, hey, we just got a call or an email for something. Hey, security department at hotel client, is this okay? Do they even know does your hotels even know how to get a hold of your CISO or CSO?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about as a software vendor, right? Right now I'm sitting on a 98 question security questionnaire. And yeah, is it perfect? No, but it's going to catch the really basic stuff, right? And yeah, I guess maybe we'll see almost like the equivalent of like, hey, what's your SOC 2 report for physical security going forward as these things change? And are your people getting background? I mean, just all the basics, right? I didn't even think about that we don't really do that for physical security.
And more mature supply chain organizations do that. And so I think that there's some good standards out there for all the different areas. But again, if we kind of think about high risk, I think the broadness of high risk expanded just a little bit more with this tragedy. And so we as executive protection professionals, there's a lot of steps we need to maybe add on to our checklists and advances, et cetera, that may not be just a few days before we're going on site to an event. Maybe it's, hey, at contract creation. And sometimes that contract creation or that event planning, sometimes it's a year ahead of time. Somebody just didn't say, hey, in a couple of weeks, why don't we have a Christmas party down at the hotel? Sometimes that's planned months and months. We need to start thinking about that. Do we need to get the procurement people and those event management people to start to engage your CSOs and your CISOs earlier on at the seat at that table?
Yeah, it feels like that responsibility is just kind of growing. Interesting. So kind of switching gears on threat number 2. I mentioned Salt Typhoon at the beginning. And like I said, there's a ton of speculation, but like what we kind of know is that our adversaries in China infiltrated our telecommunications providers. There's some talk that said maybe they got into networking equipment. There's some talk of it's possible that they ironically got into the system that's used for wiretaps and metadata collection, and so we don't know exactly what happened. What you know is the government saying, hey, you should go use encrypted messaging apps because we can't guarantee no one's snooping. And I think like the average person probably doesn't have to worry about that, but how do you think about like this threat? Like who's going to be at risk for this sort of thing? Next, maybe the guidelines from CISA on what everyone should do. And there's some gotchas there, but I'd love to know as an executive, what is this new risk that exists that we're being warned of?
Yeah, I think that going back to the old police days where you could, as they say, connect the dots. And so what happens, can I start to, if I'm an adversary, can I connect the dots between my target, a company or an individual or set of individuals, and start connecting, building that called link analysis or social network analysis. And so can I take that proverbial piece of thread and plug it in on this spot, plug it in this spot, and add on and start to learn more about the individuals that I am targeting. And so, data and information, whether in paper form or electronic form, and potentially things that come out of these types of breaches, add on to the both size and quality of that social network analysis. So I'm going to learn more about folks. And so I think that anytime we have who we talk to, who we message to, who we email, some of those things, when you start to add it together, starts to tell an industry we're creatures of habit, as they say. Whether we are individuals, companies, executives, et cetera, there's so much creatures of habit. And so I am, and I think we all are in some ways. And so could these types of data sets, or let's put it to another standpoint, is the adversary learning that these types of data sets are becoming more valuable. And so is it about some ransomware, or is it about more data that I can connect more dots to learn more about people and their movements and actions? And that's what worries me is movement and actions of humans that we should always protect first starts to become a much clearer picture. And when that starts to become a proverbial 11 by 17 pieces of paper, and because naturally we don't grow those interactions endlessly, we become part of that set 11 by 17 paper. I start to figure out who Ross is, and he's an executive, and he's doing these things. And you know what? I checked Ross again in 45 days. He's doing basically the same thing. Well, I start to see that pattern, and unfortunately, I can use that pattern to my advantage as an adversary. And again, in that pattern to attack or impact, it doesn't necessarily have to be just physical. I can now pattern that after, compromising of business email or something like that. So Ross, you and I know if we took all the emails that we have sent over 2024, somebody learned a lot about what we do and our kids and family and things like that. And so I think that it's not just messaging. I think there's a lot of things around, I'll call it broadly, communications.
Yeah.
Do we need to better protect all these different types of communications, knowing that if we start to piece them together, what we would learn, if we can learn a lot about an individual, piece them together, the adversaries can too.
God, what's an example of something that the adversaries might learn? I'm an executive at, let's say, like a real target industry. I'm in defense or something. What are they looking for? Is this like someone actually watching me? Do you think this is like an automated process? I'm so curious what your take is on what you would do with that information.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that if I want to get into your email to go after one of your suppliers, I'd like to get a lot of your emails.
Yeah.
And I'm going to learn about your supply chain. And so I may not be going after you, but I'm going to go after you. I want to go after a target in your supply chain. Great. Let's learn about, this is a pro and con. If I've got a bunch of websites out there that says ABC supplier is connected with all these places, can I start to move that in out of pretty logos on websites and into a database, a network diagram, and start to connect those dots? And so great for advertising and marketing, all those great logos of suppliers and clients, but does that tell me something? And so if I'm going after, again, ABC client or ABC supplier of your organization or my organization, boy, I would love to get some emails. If I get some phone calls, even better. But let's just start with emails. And now I can start to form and factor it. And maybe phishing is not about stealing, getting somebody to click for ransomware or doing a funds transfer. maybe phishing starts to become, I'm just phishing you for more information about that supplier. And so there doesn't have to be a link anymore. Hey, Mr. Target, love to learn about your experience when you were working with this organization. Oh, they were great. They were awesome. This is the people that I worked with. Boy, we kind of think about, be careful of the link. Well, if there is no link, then it's just questions. You talked about the questionnaire earlier. What if we take that down to 10 questions or 5 questions? May seem nonchalant, but 5 questions here plus 5 questions over here. Boy, I can start to really gather a lot about somebody's supply chain targets, movements, locations, where the next Christmas party is going to be, etc.
Yeah, especially with phone data. I can only speculate on is it, they have pings or messages? We don't really know what they got. I think is the reality. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of questions from friends that are executives, and they're like, "Hey, am I at risk now? Someone, a CEO just was gunned down in New York. It's terrible. Do I have to worry about that?" I got a friend who said someone came up to me in Chicago and knew my name, and I just he had that thought for a second of oh my God, is something bad going to happen? So. Who's it, if you were at an organization and you were trying to do a risk assessment of the executive team, what would you think about?
Yeah, naturally it would not be wise not to consider balance. I have a little crazy, my son is a wonderful Lego builder, and he created me this 3-way balance of things. And so business, safety and security, and, kind of living life. And so there's this balance of thing. And I think it's no longer a 2-way. I think it's 3-way, it's 4-way. And so what I would say is, first, I always kind of go back to who's who versus let's jump into this full kind of risk assessment. Let's get to, Mr. Executive, who would you call if you had an information security concern, a cybersecurity concern, a physical security concern, a family thing? Who would you call? And so sometimes them not having the proverbial little business card, calling card in their wallet may be the first one, problem identification. And 2 is simple solution. Here, let me give you the name and the phone number of the CISO and the CSO, et cetera. And so their ability to think broader in their security world is I think it starts with, do they know who to call? And that may sound simple, but
is that common?
Do they know who to call at 3:00 in the morning on a Sunday when they're traveling to India?
And you figure it's not awareness of that? You think that if you polled most executives, they wouldn't even know who to look up?
Yeah. I mean, if they're at a board meeting and somebody says, I have a security question, whoever the CEO calls on at that point for that question, sure, they're somewhat responsible, but fundamentally, and now we have, let's say there's 4 people that they should kind of be aware of. Is there a relationship there? Does the CEO trust and interact with those folks? Or are they so layered down in the organization? So number 1, I think, is who do they call? Number 2 is some guidance, 4 or 5 things that they can train them, their family on when to call. And of course, there's always that, if you don't feel right, still call. When to call 911 versus calling me. Because if my phone doesn't pick up at 3:00 in the morning on a Sunday, I still want you to get help. So who to call, when to call, and then let's start to there's a thing I'm putting in my training now. It says, I've always heard to say, see something, say something. So I've added on there, see something, say something, and do something. So just don't I see something bad, I'm going to say something. No, move. It's not worth it. Move. Get back into the car, stay in the car, etc. So it's those. I do a family emergency go bag class. Has your CSO, CISO ever participated in a family go bag class with your executives? Simple stuff, Band-Aids, so things like that. So let's build a relationship there that shows a level of care that is really there. And if there's a lot of organizations that don't have an executive protection program for maybe a lot of valid reasons, you still got the need.
So does that fall on the if you're a smaller organization? Does that fall on the CISO in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I want you to call somebody, and if the CISO says the people that do physical security is the facilities guy, okay, then you got a gap. So if figuring out who and who to call and the education there identifies a gap, pause. And then I think it gets into Baby, small 15-minute, 30-minute, not on video here. Training, go bag, basic first aid, identifying spam things, phishing things, showing these small tidbits of things, getting things that don't fit on screens but get on these phones. Stop building security awareness that requires them to sit at the desk. It's got to be on this type of stuff here. And then who supports them? EAs, EAs are the big area, the event security people. If they've got a driver, who's the supporting arms around them when they are traveling? So I'm just big on who to call first, small bits of training and things like that keeps going, etc. And then you've got to, I'll call it hide the complexity of threat management, of intelligence management. And when I talk about threat and intelligence management and all the protection mechanism, hide that as much as you can. But the key is think about cyber, think about fraud, think about physical, think about all the different areas. Because if I say I'm doing intelligence management, threat management, I'm going to assume that you're doing all the different domains of security. And if you're not, got a problem.
Yeah. How does, I guess, like intelligence, I'm familiar in cyber, right? We have threat feeds and we have tons and tons of data for it. How does that work in like more physical security? Is there like an analog for that? Or is that more just stuff that you've gathered internally?
Yeah, there's less standards in the way of data flows that we would have in the cyber world. But let's take something simple. News events that are going on. Obviously, the Twitter fire hose is a simple feed example. But you're analyzing and interpreting that differently than you would in a cyber context. Weather data, travel data, airplane data, outage data, FlightAware. FlightAware's got something called the misery map. Now, how do you integrate that? So there's a lot of kind of spatial and geospatial, Google Earth, Esri kind of tools that start to bring that in. And of course, there's a lot of analytics, human and machine analytics that can be done around that. But yeah, it's not as mature from a data stream standards yet because it is so what would you call it? So it's contextual.
It's moving at human speed, right?
It's unstructured.
Yeah,
it's unstructured. But there's great ways to do that. You as I tell people, don't do threat and intel work in the non-cyber world unless you really understand the full breadth of that. Because like in the cyber world, when we say, hey, we do threat intelligence, we do really. Okay, as I preach all the time, the executives assume all unless you can tell them you're not doing all.
Yeah.
And so in the cyber world, are you covering all the different operating systems of the organization? Are you covering all your supply chain? If you're not, then at least tell somebody you're not covering all those areas. In the physical or the personnel security world, are we covering all these different types of threats? And again, threats can be a bad storm. It doesn't have to be guns and violence.
Yeah. Putting in my hat as an executive, and we spoke about the low-hanging fruit that everyone should be doing. But if I'm an executive, like, what's the conversation I should be having with my CISO or CSO if I have concerns about this stuff? Like, where do you start?
Sure. What are you doing for me? What are you doing for our personnel and protecting them as individual humans? They are an amazing asset of our organization. But what are you doing forget about what you're doing for the company and the brand as in the external facing thing. What are you doing for Billy Bob down in engineering when he goes on a conference and speaks at a conference? What are you doing about me when I go over to some huge conference over in Spain? And so understanding what that is, and so sometimes it will be engaging somebody that says, Ross, did they give you the right answer? I don't know. It sounded good, but let's look at the answers that they've done, whether pictorially, PowerPoint, Word, or whatever like that, and say, have they covered the right things? And it may not be able to cover all because of staffing, but are they covering the right things for you and your peers and all the right people that need to be protected at different levels? And so what are you doing for me? How are you measuring that activity? Why haven't I when can I get my next briefing? Because if I haven't gotten a briefing since I started with this company, when do I get my regular briefings on these things? And by the way, don't give me a 2-hour, trying to interpret CNN in a news feed. Give me the 30 minutes of what I need to know, but I want a briefing on the threats and the impacts to my people. And Ross, I'll pick on you here. If you're not asking for that, you're not getting it. And so you're not getting the whole security picture from your security team. So I challenge the CEOs and leadership. If you're not asking that, bad on you, look in the mirror, start challenging that question.
Yeah. I think it's really a challenging area of security for a bunch of reasons. I think one of them is that we have a tendency in cyber to treat everyone the same, right? Because it's like we're trying to do engineering. It's repeatable things. And I think it's an area where like you really can't. This is just fundamentally different. I think that this area, because it goes outside of like work, right? Like it goes back to your family, you're on vacation and okay, well, does someone have to talk to your kid about posting something on Instagram that you're at a hotel somewhere? If you're at a higher elevated threat level, and all of your personal stuff is kind of at risk, like people are really going to be, going after you as opposed to like kind of a run-of-the-mill employee. So I just think it's a challenging thing for people to think through.
Yeah, it's a balance of fear and freedom that we have to deal with. The freedom to be able to enjoy our family, the freedom to be able to run the business, and that level of fear. As I use the example is, if I could get the executives to do one thing, and their families, and really all folks, is trust a little bit less than you did yesterday. So I always use the example of, I love my Jeep. So my little Jeep fob, guess what? Every time I get out of my Jeep, I hit the button. And why do I hit it the second time to hear the horn? Because I just don't trust it. So we hit the fob twice. We all do it. We wait for the beep. We wait for the flashlight because we don't trust the fob. So in our world of security, whether we're traveling or whatever, and executives trust a little bit less and get folks, I want to give you a tool that I want to give you a set of tools and a set of information throughout your day-to-day, monthly, quarterly work that makes you feel safe and your family feel safe and all of the employees feel safe. But I also want to give you tools that when you don't feel safe, you've got some tools in that toolbox. And so I'm going to educate you on saying things like, hey, somebody is, if the Uber driver doesn't quite show up at the right place, you know what? Don't worry about it. Go back inside. Call somebody else. Call me, whatever. So it's educating without saying the world's going to come to an end. Kind of take away the freedoms of running the business or running our family. It is a balanced scale in that just executives need to ask more, and the CISO and the CSOs need to offer it at a relationship level, not a technical level.
Yeah, I do also think that the technical level is sometimes lacking. I think we don't back to treating everyone the same. For most employees, you don't really need to get into their the security of their personal devices and email. I know a lot of people I've spoken to where I'm like, hey, did you know that you can set a PIN on your SIM card so it can't be swapped? Or did you know that if you get your email, that you can reset the password and it sends you an SMS short code that someone can, especially now Salt Typhoon, someone can read that text message and get that code and get in your account. Did you know there's advanced security modes, both in iCloud and in Gmail that you can use? And I think there needs to be a bit more awareness of if you really are, a risk and, there's threats out there that they're going to target you. You need to go into your personal life and secure those things too, because those are now tied, especially remote work, they're going to be tied to your business stuff and business systems. And people will be able to use that to social engineer other folks, and it's happened, right? And continues to happen. So I agree with you, but I also think there's some work to do on the technical side of getting a little more personal, and then that extends to back to the challenging part, extends to your family too, I think, right? There's been a big rise in these deepfake scams where the scammers will get a deepfake clone of their children's voice, call the parents and say, hey, I got your kids in jail or something, wire us some money. So if that's hey, give me your password or something, I'm just naming create a scenario to Outlook. Are they going to call you first or are they going to give it? I don't know. But why even put yourself in a situation in the first place?
Yeah, I go back to security awareness needs to be broader. Security awareness, we've said it forever. It was before my time it came out. And so I think, again, we take around the word security, we around the word awareness. And now I think we add on the third leg of that is the audience. And I think that audience now gets to expand what I give to an executive that travels a lot, what awareness, what security I deliver to that person, what I deliver now to their audience, meaning the kids, their family, etc. Same way, no different than the wonderful receptionist at the front desk. He or she may need something much more targeted for what her world is that may be completely irrelevant because she's a single mom or something like that, may be completely irrelevant than what the executive may need or something like that. And so can I help those EAs of the world, the receptionists of the world, with their customized security awareness? And again, security being broad here. Can I come in and do a family go bag class so that lady up front now she feels more safe when she's with her kids because she's got a go bag. And by the way, when she feels more safe because Ross, you invested in a family go bag class for her, guess what? She's going to take the security of everything else within your organization more serious. We can help them personally. We're gonna help them out, in the business. There's an ROI there that's tremendous in the area of culture. Same way with the executive. If I take care of the executive and his or her spouse, and make them feel just as safe. Oh man, don't bother me. Just take care of him. No, ma'am. No, sir. I'm going to help you too. Can I educate you? Those opportunities, the security and awareness and audience. Let's grow those in 2025. And that includes the phishing expertise. When we doing phishing testing, if we've deployed phishing testing capabilities within organizations, is there any reason why we can't extend that to families to help it as a benefit to our families?
Yeah, I hear a lot about this. I was talking to a CISO a few months ago, and he said, our security training, all of it never really tells you about your personal life. It's always like it stops at corporate. The most personal gets is a flash drive to a hotel. And that's how they're getting in now with remote work. People are mixing personal devices and business devices, and people aren't coming to the office anymore. You're relying on digital communications methods. It's a whole lot easier for the attackers, and they're evolving, which I think is a good segue into talking about AI, because we can't have a podcast in cybersecurity anymore without talking about AI. So I'd love to talk about how AI, what's AI's role now in all of this?
Obviously, the adversaries is going to take advantage of it. When Slim Jims came out to break into cars, they went away from hammers to Slim Jims.
What's a Slim Jim? like the snack?
No, it's the lock on a door.
Yeah, those things.
Yeah. So I think the key is it's a tool. It's a tool for good, it's a tool for bad type thing. So I think that it accelerates the good and the bad. It makes it faster. It makes it harder to understand. When we don't understand it, it's harder to detect and harder to recognize its uniqueness. So, and of course, I have a magazine. I'm an old fan of old industry magazines, and I have this magazine that says the front page is the evolution of artificial intelligence, AI, and software, something like that. And people think, oh, well, that's an interesting magazine. I say, yeah, but it's dated 1981. So I think that AI, if we're not taking advantage of AI in this realm of protecting people, cyber people, the cyber side of that, the physical side of that, et cetera, we're doing a disservice. And so let's ask some questions around how is AI, and/or an organization that says we're using AI, how does it protect my people first? Well, we're a cyber company, okay, but I want to protect my people first. So there's that side. I think on the adversary side, my old days when I would take link analysis and it was, the proverbial Visio drawing things out in Visio. Wow. I saw a great post on LinkedIn yesterday of a great graphic analytics guy, does a bunch of Power BI stuff, and he's built a link analysis tool within Power BI, which I don't understand how that works, but I saw that and went, man, if I had data or information on humans that I wanted to target, plop it into spreadsheet, whatever, and now we're not having to. I think the other thing is where the adversary can take a lot more unstructured data.
Totally.
And pull out, we used to call it identity matching, where you pull out cities and states and dates and things like that. Wow, that used to be hard to do, and now it's okay. Here's 1,000 emails from my target. Pull out the dates, times, locations, and people's names, and put it into a spreadsheet for me. Now put that into a network, a link analysis. Boy, that's some scary stuff. And so if we don't think on the cyber side and the physical side that that's not a real ask of AI tools, we're already behind.
Definitely. I think AI is interesting because it's simultaneously way overhyped and way underhyped. On the attacker side, I think that there's a lot of FUD around, there's deepfakes and AI, and like, it's not wrong, but what we're seeing isn't like Skynet's going out and hacking people, right? We're seeing in the past, you could rely on bad grammar. Well, not anymore. You could rely on like having a weird looking website that didn't look like the Microsoft login page. Well, cool. That's not anymore. They can ask ChatGPT. They have a weird accent when they call you. They sound like a Bond villain. Nope. Now they can use an AI voice changer or a text to speech. The email's not personalized. Well, like you said, they can bake all this information. So we're at the beginning of it. So I view it much like in software engineering, we're not at the point yet where the AI is writing the code, but I can tell you my company, we're like easily twice as productive right now. So I think it's like the way that it's impacting and helping attackers is the same way it's helping engineers, which is this huge accelerant for folks. And I just think that like if you're not adapting on the defending side, using that to defend, you're going to be at a very serious disadvantage.
Yeah, the old saying of why do bank robbers rob banks? It's kind of where the money is. Yeah. So, it's still simple crime. It's still, the fraud triangle still works. And so when we take that fraud triangle, I think AI is taking that concept and just accelerating it for the adversaries. And of course, data and information in any form, where it used to all have to be, hey, Jim, can you get that into an XML or an Excel file for me to analyze it? So that was when I would do analytics and investigations and such like that. Spent more time getting the data pretty to analyze instead of analyzing the data and doing analytics, etc. Okay, now it's put this into a spreadsheet for me. Boom. So again, adversaries have got more time than us that are trying to run businesses.
Yeah. It's like the perfect storm too, right? We have all the data's out there. It's not going away. The people with the motive are there and all the tools are there. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting watching what happens over the next few years.
Yeah. And so the physical security folks, you can barely spell AI because you don't want to make that change.
Yeah.
Cyber folks, your CISO folks, stop trying to make it more complicated. You got to simplify it for the engineer out in the field. We can't take learning management systems and training and make them all the same. Okay, everybody goes through this, a learning path. No, I truly believe that the learning path of the future, AI being a great example of it. If you've got 500 people in your organization, you got 500 plus your supply chain and your customers of training. Is your customers in your LMS? Is your suppliers in your LMS? If they're not, you're missing a target vector of me if I'm an adversary. Because if I know you're training your employees and I know you're not training your suppliers and your customers, I know where I'm going after.
Yeah, it's like supply chain applied to security awareness. It's an interesting concept that I don't think people really talk about or is explored.
Yep. Yeah, when I talk about supply chain, it's kind of like we talked about earlier. Do even people understand what the term supplier means from a risk standpoint? Mm-hmm. And I have a whole class that I do on that, and people go through that class and their eyes get about this big and go, okay, you just freaked me out. Yeah, because I'm talking about suppliers and risk. Ross, you and I, if I was in town, you'd say, Jim, let's go grab some lunch. Where do you want to go, Jim? I'll be the first one to say, let's go to Chipotle. Ross, you come here and you say, I'd love to check out some Texas barbecue.
Better Mexican food in San Francisco than Chipotle.
Yeah. So, a little sourdough bread there. But, you come to Texas and you say, I want some barbecue. Okay. Yeah. Is Heart 8 Barbecue and Chipotle a supplier, of our organizations? Do they present a risk to our organization? People are, absolutely. So the whole supply chain thing, if you're not including awareness, testing, those kind of things on your supply chain, and sometimes on certain customers, you're missing part of the pie.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to talk a bit about your consultancy and the work that you do and your books. And tell us about Ask McConnell. and why you
Yeah,
started?
no, I've been honored to build out a small converged security consulting firm and doing some training. We look at converged security across a few pain points: supply chain, mergers and acquisitions, but we look at it from a physical and cyber and information fraud. So we look at it across those different areas, covering a number of different industries. I had the honor about a year or so ago got real frustrated in my own industry with security metrics. So I wrote a book called Converged Security Metrics, my first edition, and then got involved a little bit with the safety world, and so found that their metrics world was much weaker than I could have expected for as long as safety has been in our world and regulated. And so wrote my second book on converged safety metrics. We all need security. We all need safety. Even when I talk to a faith-based organization, I'm talking to them about both. But both books are really less about, a couple chapters on how and why. But what I did in the security metrics one was provided over 500 metrics that any organization can start to implement immediately. And so you don't have to sit there and go, great, you told me why. Tell me, you got any examples? And so you've really got the ability to take a topic. And somebody asked me one time, can I tear out a couple of pages of your book and give it to my engineer? Yes, because they're real live 25 metrics that they can pull out and say, here's one on information security. So love the consulting side and love to partner, Ross, with you and your team and others where I can. I'll tell you, I'm the first person to tell you what I don't do. Are valuable, I think, to folks, and love to answer questions to folks if they ever have them.
And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I'm a boring, simple kind of thing. AskMcConnell.com, AskMcConnell.com is where it is. I'm on LinkedIn, heavy on LinkedIn. Do a lot of a couple newsletters and articles there, but glad to support folks out into domestically, internationally, and in the industry, and give back where I can and consult where I can.
Well, thanks for being our guinea pig and our first guest ever. I'm looking forward to many more of these.
Hopefully it's been valuable to you and your audience.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much, Jim.
Yeah, honored.